being in a position and just felt like I was being held there and I was kept there. And literally, I think, unlike probably what you guys were saying, in my team, there was lots of movement. So lots of people were then progressing around me. Lots of people who started around the same time as me, or even started before me, or a little bit after me, were progressing on, except from me.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Listen In podcast. My name's Aravana.
My name is Anya.
And my name's Boomy.
Let's get into it. Okay, so let's start by thinking about our own progression through work. How easy have you found it to progress?
I feel like I've had to make my own path, really, in terms of progressing, and it usually involves leaving and going somewhere else.
Yeah. Why do you feel like you had to leave in that situation?
I just felt, I think I feel like all the different situations that I've been in, so I've worked in 2 different trusts so far, and there are different things in different places that were really good or not so good, but I just don't feel like there was, in either of the places, I don't feel like there was this sort of emphasis on you being made to progress, or you, like me, being put forward for things. Or, I mean, my supervisor did sort of tell me about things and advise me to do different things, but I mean, in terms of the maybe the leaders, the people who are in position of power, they weren't necessarily kind of putting me forward for things or saying, you know, I think this would be really good for you. I think you should go for this opportunity that will give you the skills to go up to the next level. It's always been more about my role that I'm doing day to day and things that I have to do to fulfill my role day to day. Rather, all sort of mentoring to progress in my career, if that makes sense. So I think I just felt like if I wanted to progress, and also, to be fair, like there weren't that many opportunities to progress anyway. It just felt quite like you get your job, this is your position, and it doesn't feel like there's any room to move forwards. It's just, you're just kind of there. Because you know, job wise, I think the NHS has been in quite a funny position for a while. But yeah, I've just felt like in order to move to the next step, I've had to move somewhere else, or find the next opportunity myself.
Yeah. So basically, it sounds like where you was at, there wasn't a lot of movement, I guess, within the team, which is creating those types of roles. But also, like, in terms of from management, it's not like you were really pushed or encouraged
no,
to do anything. But then you was told about things like training.
No, not. Do you know what? That was my first role. My supervisor would tell me about training to go on that would be useful for the role,
right?
You know, and in my current role, I've looked for the training myself, and I've done my own training. It hasn't been, oh, there's this course and it'd be really good for you to develop as a therapist in this area. No, it's been from me. My old role, the trust that I worked in before, they were very open and willing for you to go to things like go to special interest groups, or if you did find training and there was money available, they were happy to excuse me, they were happy to fund that to a certain degree. And yeah, they just supported in that way. In my current place that I work, it's not as easy to do that. So I've found my own opportunities, because I just don't believe in letting somebody else tell me what I can and can't do in terms of my training, because I
Yeah.
just felt like it's kind of clipping my. I can't let somebody else clip my wings, and
No.
if they're not actively pushing me for certain situations or certain training, then I need to. For me, I'm going to go and find my own opportunities and do things myself, even to the extent of paying for things myself, which some people are not willing to do. But for me, I am to move forward in my career for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's fair enough.
It's a shame, in my opinion. I think it's a shame though that you have to. Those opportunities are there, and obviously, I think in an ideal world, it would be great if you worked within a service that supported you to do those things. Because, like you said, if the money was there for it and the opportunity was there, and you were willing, then obviously it's as part of your continuous professional development. That is a bonus to them, if that makes sense. You're going to use some of that learning as part of what you do for them. So I think it's a bit sad sometimes that you have to go and pay for your own. I've had to start to do that for myself now, actually, because I've just realized that, like you rightly said, I can't let people just put a blockage on my path. I have to like carve my own path and just like make room for myself as much as possible. Yeah, so, but it's quite sad when that happens. What I think that it'd be great to work together.
I think, oh, sorry, Anya. I think the other thing that you said that's just prompted my memory is that I feel like I haven't been told about opportunities. And I feel like in most places that I've worked, there just tends to be certain people that always know about opportunities, or they're always offered opportunities to do certain things. Whereas I haven't been offered those opportunities, so I'll find out later on. So a very short example is I signed up for the NHS Inspiring Futures. It's a scheme where I think I told you guys about it.
Yeah.
They ask people to go to schools and talk about their careers to promote it to like the next generation or whatever, especially people from Black and Asian and other ethnic minority groups. So I joined that, but it's a bit complicated because some of it is obviously internal from me, but I just didn't feel that I would be supported to take part in it just because of pressures of the service, etc. So when I did have, and when I was asked to visit a school, I just took time off, like using my own personal annual leave, because I just had some spare and I knew I wasn't going on holiday or anything.
Gosh.
I used my leave to go to, because I find that important to go, and I haven't done it a lot. I've only been able to do like one before COVID happened. But I felt that it was important for me to go and represent and tell younger students about speech therapy and stuff like that. So I was happy enough to use my own time to do that. So we had a meeting about something or other, I can't remember, and the topic came up, and I mentioned that I would use my time. I used my own time to do it, and one of my team members said that that she does that every year. Like, as part of the team, they have some sort of time allocated for telling the younger generation about speech therapy. So she had been allocated time to go to colleges and stuff like that to talk about speech therapy and blah blah blah. And I was like, oh, I had no clue that was a thing. I had no. So there's lots of different levels. Like, maybe if I had actually talked to a manager, they may have said, oh, there's this allocated time that we can give you. But now at least I know I have that information now. So in future, if I was staying, because I'm moving on, but if I was staying, I would have that information. I can say, well, I've heard that there's this and I'm involved in this. Can I have that allocated time for Inspiring Futures or whatever else?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a shame that you've kind of discovered this towards the end of your time there. You know,
Mm.
you can't really use it now that you know, unless you go back, you know, and I think that's a bit of a shame. And even just as you was talking earlier, I was just thinking, but these trusts, they are given an allocated budget for training. Most
Mm.
trusts have an allocated budget for training. So the fact that, you know, that hasn't been necessarily used for you and your own development is a bit of an issue. Like, I mean, I guess I know a lot of trusts, they have kind of they have something where, I don't know if it's the guideline, but they've got something where, you know, if you're doing a certain role, then they will fully support you to develop within that role. But if you wanted to train in something completely different, then that's where there's a bit more issues. So, for example, say if you're working with children with autism, that's your main role, and then you want to suddenly go and study children with speech sound difficulties who have, like, you know, or stammering difficulties, because it's not very, I mean, obviously there is overlap for some children, but often it is quite separate and it is a different area. So I think to do something like that, I think from what I've seen as well from my workplaces that I've worked in, that's not as well supported as if you said, I want to develop my skills in the area of autism by going on this course, for example. But it sounds like in your example, and probably because we've spoken before about the same issue, Rabna, that you have done that. You found something which is related to what you're currently doing, and it hasn't always been easy for you to kind of get the supports around that, which, and then you've resulted to self-funding, taking annual leave in order to do that, which is a real shame. How did that make you feel? And also, has that impacted on your progression?
I think I didn't really, again, I don't really think about things at the time.
Yeah.
But I think the more it happened, the more annoyed I became with it, or the more I was just like, do you know what? This is it. This is just the path it's going to be. But I think for me, I'm just more determined that if there's something that I think is good for me to do, and I think it'll be useful for me for my own progression, I'm not letting anyone get in my way of that. So if that's the price that I'm willing to pay, I know everybody else is not willing to pay that, because I've even had conversations with other therapists who are not from minority groups about certain training that they've not been able to go on and things, and they'll be like, oh, I heard that you went on this training. I'm like, yep. I self-funded, and then they're not prepared to take that that step, but I am, because I know what I am aiming for, and I'm not going to depend on somebody giving me that opportunity. I'm going to go and get that opportunity for myself. However, that shouldn't be the standard for everybody, and I shouldn't have to do that, you know.
No.
And when I think about it, when I really think about it and I really process it, it is unfair and it is not good. But I feel like I've learned things for the future that I can maybe use it for, and all of those things have, because I think for me as well, I just felt like, in terms of that, it's two things. It's not necessarily just progression, it's also about my confidence and feeling like I was able to do a good job as well. So like my ongoing professional development, I know they're like overlaps, but they're kind of in my head sort of separate. So a lot of the things that I did was about my professional development that made me feel that I could do a good enough job in what I was doing. That is why I was doing all those different trainings and things like that, to make me feel like I was actually serving my client group that I was working with. But in terms of progression, I just feel like I haven't been, no one has given me opportunities to progress within my roles. They just haven't. For example, there was a time where I was working in a certain clinic, and that we had a really bad staff shortage. So myself and I said to my manager at the time, well, I can help with this. So I sort of set it up, and me and another colleague were managing it together. And then when things got better, like, they said thank you at the time, but when things got better and they got someone more senior, it was just like, this person's going to do it now. And then that was it. And I wasn't involved in it after that, even though at the time when there was the problem, me and my colleague together, both from BAME backgrounds, came up with a solution, or a temporary solution, fair enough, but nothing happened from there apart from a thank you at the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't like that was a thing to say, oh, like, we can see that you guys are good at this. Here's another opportunity to try this, because even though you're not a manager now or whatever, this will give you the skills in the future to do whatever else. There wasn't that sort of link. It was just like, thanks. Does that make any sense?
It does, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I haven't had that person saying, and I mean, we had this discussion in one of our last episodes about people who helped along the way, and that's why I'm saying that I feel like talking to you guys, talking to other people outside of work, going to these events and learning things with other people, that's what's been helping me with my ideas for progression and my own determination and my own ideas of what I want to do, not anyone in particular at work. But I do feel that work should be developing all their staff members. They should be helping people to actively progress, because that's part of their role, I believe.
It is. And can I just ask as well, do you have opportunities in your, like, since you've been working there, because you've been working there a while, it's not like you've just got there, it's been what, like 4 years that you've been in this place? So to not have felt that for 4 years is a massive thing. But do you think that you had the opportunity to talk about what it is that you actually want? So did you have a conversation with any of your managers at any point where they sat you down and said, you know, what do you want? What are your aims? You know, what are you passionate about?
No, not really. I feel like in a lot of places it can become quite run of the mill. So you know that you have like your yearly, you have your appraisal or whatever, and I just feel like it's always very surface level. It's not the bigger picture. It's not what are you aiming for in 5 years and how can we help you to get there, or we've seen this skill in you and we feel like we want to give you more positions. So for example, one of my friends worked in another trust, and they have I don't know the ins and outs, but they actively sort of give people responsibility. So they'll make them, even if they're like a generalist therapist working in a mainstream school or something like that, they will give one of them the responsibility to be the lead of a certain area, and they'll give them certain things that they should be able to do and manage in the position that they're at. I think stuff like that is brilliant because it's giving you the opportunities to practice the skills that you'll need to move up the ladder. But I feel like most of the time they don't give you these opportunities to build these quote unquote soft skills. So then later on when you go to an interview and they're saying, tell us when you've done this, what do you have to say? You haven't been given that opportunity to practice those skills. So how are you going to progress to that next level? Do you know what I mean? You've been given the opportunity to do the job that they've given you to do. And to continue to do it well, but not to progress laterally or whatever, or however other way, you know. And I feel like for me, I was just like, I'm going to try and find a way to progress myself, but not everyone has that same mindset, and not everybody can do that.
Of course, yeah. It must be quite difficult for some managers as well, in terms of in terms of knowing how much they can push someone towards something without it falling too far away from their actual role. Do you know what I mean? Like that example that I told you about with, you know, someone who is working with children with autism, and then someone who has a passion for stammering, but it's not really what their main role is. I'm thinking it must be quite difficult with managers to know how to kind of deal with that. So whether they say, yeah, okay, do that training for stammering, we'll fund it, or whether they say, okay, you know, what we'll do is we'll provide you with shadowing opportunities so you can shadow some stammering. You know, maybe you can help out with the clinics in the summer holidays when the kids aren't there. You can help up with the stammering. So they're still building up their skills. Maybe I'm answering my question. Maybe this is what I think. Maybe they can do it so that they're still building up their skills. They still have those opportunities. But the fact is that their passion for stammering has been recognized and acknowledged. And they're still, the managers are still supportive of that development.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like, you answered the question. It's not necessarily about paying for someone to go on a course, and it's not necessarily about specific courses. It's about giving people opportunities. I think it's about them, the managers, leaders, thinking about ways to develop their staff so that they can progress. Because I feel like a lot of times, for me, they haven't done that for me. But I feel like they have for other people.
Yeah.
And the reasoning for that, I can't, you know, I can't say what it is, but they have done it for other people blatantly. So why is it that with me, it's not even considered, or it's not even brought up or put in a way that I can actually gain something from it in order to move on, or to move up, or, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a real shame actually that you've experienced that. And I think on a personal level, because I know you personally, and we've had loads of conversations, and I see your work ethic, and we've had loads of conversations about a lot of things. I definitely see the great qualities and skills that you have.
And thanks.
So on a personal note, this upsets me because I just feel like, you know, you could have done so much more with that. Had you had the right kind of supportive environment, so much more of that greatness could have been seen, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
But I think the good thing is though that you have a goal in mind, and you haven't let circumstances deter you from that. You know exactly where you want to be. You kind of know what skills you want to learn. You although these things have happened around you, you've still persevered through that anyway, and you've just kind of stayed in your own lane and, you know, kept going at it. And I think that's really good. I think a lot of people would have felt quite discouraged through that, which is understandable. But I think you've definitely persevered. So that's a really good characteristic that you've got.
Thank you.
It's okay. But yeah, so what about you, Bumi? Like, how's your journey been through progression?
For me, like in terms of my career progression, you both know that it took me a bit longer to get my first job. And I think that's part of the progression in terms of going from a newly qualified therapist to actually like starting on a new role, if that makes sense, your first role. So that took me a bit longer. And obviously we've already covered that on a different topic. But actually, my progression from being a band 5 to a band 6, I think that's happened much quicker. And I think the only reason why it's happened is because an opportunity came along. There is a bit of a turnover in terms of people leaving and moving on, but also we then do tend to have people, because obviously we have some of my colleagues are married, they're settled in the area. So on the flip side of this, that we don't get a lot of people to move, but somehow a few people did move, and I know that that's how that opportunity came up. Otherwise, I get the feeling that it would have been likely that I may have stayed at band 5 for a while, like I said, because of the dynamics of how things are. I do think my progression from being a band 5 to a band 6 is like happened in a short space of time in comparison to what I would have anticipated.
Mm.
But also in terms of then moving on to specializing the areas of interest that I've expressed from the word go, I've just found that it hasn't really happened the way I would have anticipated. That I put myself forward for opportunities when they've come, but I find for whatever reason, other people just seem to get their foot in the door.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to
We can
know.
really talk about.
I'll be interested to know, who are these other people?
Good question. So I think I was giving you both a scenario the other day, and I don't know the reasons, but I was saying to you that sometimes I think because we're a female heavy profession, that sometimes when a male comes along, that we're just very happy to put them into certain positions, if that makes sense. So for myself, I can think about the fact that I've always expressed interest in dysphagia. It's one of the things that I absolutely loved at uni. And I've expressed that if there is a vacancy to join the specialist team, that I'll be interested in that. And then a band 5 speech and language therapist male came along and somehow he's got trained up to do that. And I did express interest when the vacancy came up, but I wasn't then considered for it. And even sometimes, just like you said, rather like things like the certain trainings as well that I want to, just because again, it would help the role because I do cover special school, and also to kind of like help me feel more confident to deliver within that capacity. And like sometimes those trainings have just been rejected, again, like simple excuse of funding, but I've heard of other people going on to do the same course.
If it's happening all the time and you're not being given a good enough reason, or you find that somebody else has been given that opportunity, then it's like, okay, and that's no shade to the other people, like that's good for you, do you, but it's just why is it that when you ask for that opportunity or you express an interest before the opportunity comes up, when that opportunity does arise, why do they not think of you when you have said several times, I'm interested in this, I want to do this? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's really interesting.
Definitely.
That's the only word I can think of to describe it.
If in doubt, go with interesting.
Yeah.
And obviously, like I've told you both about my recent experience with hearing impairment as well, in terms of putting myself forward for that. And then obviously, and I can see the rationale why, because we're in a tricky position at the moment with the service, that actually all the people were trained up and covered that covered that specialist arm of the service. They've moved on to pastures new. So I can see the rationale for wanting to employ someone who's already skilled, rather than spending the time to train up a new therapist within that role. I see that from that perspective, but it still doesn't make it any less upsetting sometimes when you know what you can do. And it's sometimes I think it's also about how it's communicated. It should not be absolutely unfair to my organization, that actually, although they have said that they would rather employ someone who's already specialist in that area, which I appreciate, I've also been given some time within that specialist caseload now, so like the mainstream side of things, which is great, and obviously just kind of challenges me a bit. So that's great. It's just like when you think about everything, like, and I think sometimes I understand that there are service priorities that we have to kind of consider, but also it would be much more beneficial for both our time and the time of organizations, isn't it? Like, if you actually do get an opportunity within your areas of interest, it'll be absolutely beneficial. I feel like there would have been a bit of a difference probably in my career progression and stuff if I'm now working within those areas that I'm really interested in, and developing my skills in those areas.
And I feel like they're all of these things are little things that impact on a person's ability to progress. And I feel like that is probably part of these sort of stories are part of the reason why we don't see people of from ethnic minorities in positions of power, because they haven't been given those, because it's those little things that you build on to get to that higher level of responsibility or power, whatever you want to call it. So if at this very basic level we feel like we're not being given that opportunity to progress within our careers, within our current roles, how are we supposed to get those opportunities to move up the scale? Do you know what I mean? So I think that it is an important point, It really is. And I've had to move personally to move up the pay scale and the banding, as we say in the NHS. And I know like it was the same for you as well, isn't it, Anya? Do you want to
Yep,
speak on that a
absolutely.
bit? Talk about your
Oh,
journey.
I mean, I'm going to speak
Big
about my
one.
journey anyway, aren't I? I don't know if we'll have time to go into all of it now, but yeah, I definitely experienced something similar to both of you in terms of um, being in a position and just felt like I was being held there and I was kept there. And literally, I think, unlike probably what you guys were saying, in my team, there was lots of movement. So lots of people were then progressing around me. Lots of people who started around the same time as me, or even started before me, or a little bit after me, were progressing on, except from me. And I think that was quite a challenging situation. Just being somewhere and feeling like for some reason you're being held back, but everyone else is moving forward. That was quite tricky in that sense. But I think what Arabna said as well around kind of having people, friends, family that you can talk to, who can encourage you, who can remind you of your skills, even like colleagues who could see good things about what you're doing and, you know, encourage you through that was really helpful. In my first job, I was not actually sent. So this, I'm referring to my first job, by the way. So in my first job, I was not sent on any formal training. That was reserved for the band sevens. They all went on formal training. Everyone else couldn't go, or wasn't encouraged to go. And then it was for the band sevens to come and feedback their learning from the training, which I felt like, why can't I go? Because yes, the band seven is more skilled in that area, and I get that they can come back and talk about how it will be applicable to our role. But at the same time, we can all go on the same training and take something different from it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it would have been good to have that opportunity to have gone on some of that training and learn. But again, that was just not something that was encouraged, and that wasn't just for me. That was for everyone in the service. That was just kind of their standard procedure. So yeah, it hasn't been easy, but I think having people around who can encourage and remind you of your skills and actually moving on. It took me moving on before I could actually progress. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to go into all of this properly another time anyway, because there's so much to say.
There is, and it's a big one. And I think you've been very succinct there, but yeah, all of that is to say that there's more to the story.
Yeah, to be continued.
To be continued. But yeah, I just think you know, it is a big thing, like, because what are they saying? If you've been somewhere for a while, and this is why I kind of don't understand in some ways, because I think that in a lot of places that I've worked, not just in our current not in just in speech therapy, in general, sometimes there is this thing where there's a certain person or certain people who appear to be given all the opportunities and they're the first one that they think of for this and the first one that they think of that. And I know we talked a bit about, you know, even in terms of like people employing others, them taking on people who they think they get on with and things like that. But I just don't know why that, you know, these managers or people in position don't stop and think, hold on, I've sent so-and-so on 10 trainings, or so-and-so is doing this and this, and this person isn't being given an opportunity to do anything, or let's just say they're not doing anything leadership wise. Why don't I give this person the opportunity? But sometimes it just feels like they're happy for you to just be there and do the work and tick the boxes for them. They're not there to let you progress. But for somebody else, they will actively push them forward. And
It's
I think
almost, sorry
yeah,
to
go on.
interrupt you. I was
Go
just
on.
going to say, it's almost like it's more for business. So,
Mm,
you know,
mm,
you're here to fill this role, you're here to fill that role. We need you here to fill this role. We need you
Mm,
to fill this vacancy.
yeah.
yeah,
So it's almost like I need you to stay here to make my
yeah,
life easier because I've
yeah,
employed you for this vacancy. I don't want you to move because if
yeah.
you move, I then have to go and find someone else who can replace you. Spend that time, you know, inducting them, training them. I
Mm-hmm.
just need you to stay here.
Mm,
But I think by having that mindset, you're. I think it does affect the actual therapist, and
Mm,
it affects how that therapist feels. So
mm,
often therapists don't feel valued when things like that happens. You know,
mm,
mm,
what they actually want to do is not actually being listened to, and
mm.
that's why therapists leave a lot of the time because they feel that,
mhm,
Yeah,
oh, I'm not getting this opportunity here, let me move on.
yeah.
And I
yeah.
think if organizations were more flexible with kind of supporting staff and, you know,
Mm,
providing those opportunities and encouraging staff towards things and helping draw out their strengths, because sometimes I find you don't always know what you want to do, what
mm,
you want to kind of go into, but someone kind of
Mm,
coming alongside and saying, oh, you're really good at this, so I can see that you're
mm,
quite interested in this, have you
mm,
considered this, you know, and helping them kind of find their way. I think
mm.
definitely.
that could also really help staff feel a bit more empowered in that sense and make them want to stay in an
Yeah.
organization.
And
Exactly.
just sort of like jumping off the back of that, like even if you do have that mindset that you described of, I need you to do this and this,
Mm,
even with that mindset, I still see that even though this other person's been put in that same sort of box, you're still giving them opportunities to
mm,
expand their skills in a way that will allow them to develop. But you're not doing that for me, and you're not doing that for Anya, and you're not doing that for Bumi. Why is that?
mm,
Do you know what I
Mm,
mean? It's kind of, why is it that you don't think about us as well? Why is it
mm,
that you don't put us forward for things as well? Why is it that you feel like we can just manage and cope where we are, but for other people in your teams that look like you, that come from the same background as you, that's the same, uh, ethnicity as you, you're actively pushing them forward. Why is
mm,
that? So it's just I think they need to think as well, and they need to actively try and I'm not saying just suddenly go and pluck people and put them somewhere, because that's fake. Like,
mhm,
just honestly just think about it and think, why am I not considering these people as well? What is it
mhm,
about the way that I think about them that is stopping me from doing that? Am
mhm,
I treating are people being actually treated equally?
mm,
Because I don't think that we are, and that's part of the reason why it makes it
mhm,
harder to progress. That whole
mhm,
day to day sort of blockage, like you were saying, of being given opportunities to grow and to expand. Is it that you
mm,
have preconceptions about me or about people who look like me and feel like we can't do certain things? Is that what's getting in the way?
mm.
Is it, do you know what I mean?
mm,
There's so many things. Like, obviously we're talking about our experience and we can't say what's going on in somebody
Yeah.
else's head, but we do know that this is a pattern across
Mhm.
sectors. Like, even
Yeah.
some of the stats that we found, that you know there's not many people from ethnic minorities in positions of power. Like we said earlier, well, if you're not even giving us the basic sort of opportunities to practice basic skills, but you're giving it
Mm,
to your friend or the
mm,
one who's from the same town as you or whatever, how are we supposed to move forward? So then it
mm,
just ends up with, either you feel like you need to push your way through and you do your own thing, or you just
mm.
mm.
end up in the same position
Yeah. Yeah. I
for
Yeah.
mean,
however long.
definitely, I agree with you, and I I just think it's a real shame, and I definitely think that, you know, I do wonder actually whether people are putting people forward because they see themselves in that person as well. They see an element of themselves, or they see someone who they think, actually, I think, you know, you remind me of someone who's already here, and that's why I will
Mm,
progress you to this point. Just to
yeah.
throw, just to put out this disclaimer though, when I was speaking about my experience, I was talking about my first job. The job that I'm in now has been very supportive and has, you know, really supported me through training, and my manager's been really supportive and encouraging me to go for training and to develop my skills in different areas. Personally, for me, that it's been good for me. So it's not every single person.
It's not everyone, no.
It's not every place. But I think what we are referring to a lot in this episode is, you know, the times when it hasn't been very encouraging, and actually how that has impacted us in terms of our progression. Because, like I said, now that I'm in a place where it has been a lot more supportive, I've definitely progressed.
You have, and look at all the stuff. This is like, Anya, like, sorry to interrupt, but this is a prime example of what we're talking about. You were in a place where they didn't actively encourage you, and they didn't actively give you opportunities. The same Anya moves to another place, is given opportunities, and look at all the stuff that you're doing.
Amazing stuff.
It's not you, it's the situation. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, they did not give you those opportunities that they should have, but this other place is actually giving you those opportunities, and I'm sure they're giving your other colleagues opportunities as well. But it's just that, you know, there's so much that we've talked about this so much. There's so much, you know, discrimination and, you know, biases and stereotypes and stuff like that. And I just hope that people can kind of try and think about it and reflect on themselves, just like, you know, for certain things I'll have to reflect on myself as well and see what I'm doing or whatever. Reflect on it. Why are you not giving these people opportunities? The people that you're giving opportunities, do they all look the same? Do they all come from the same place? Are they all your friends? Are you not giving me an opportunity because you have a certain view of me, or do you know what I mean? Like,
and are you paying attention to what your colleagues are doing well? You know, are you actually recognizing what the people who you're managing are doing well? Are you drawing out are you seeing their strengths, and are you drawing that out of them as well? You know, I think that's a good question to have, because, you know, there's lots that us therapists do, which is good. And there's lots that we are, you know, a lot of us work really hard and we are doing good things, but that needs to be recognized as well. And I think sometimes it's very much overlooked. It's like, okay, great, thank you for doing that. And that's it.
It's
not like, wow, that's brilliant that you've done that. Like, you know, and then making a mental note of the fact that that person's done that and done that really well, and know that, oh, you've actually got a really good skill in that area. And sorry to go off, I'm not going to go off too long. But in terms of like leadership as well, like I've been looking into that a lot more, because now I'm in management and stuff. I've been looking into that a lot more. And it talks about the importance of recognizing the strengths of the members in your team. So recognizing that everyone has something individual and unique that they can do well, and actually using that to the advantage of the team. So drawing out the strengths and thinking, okay, you know, this one's great at, I don't know, at kind of doing presentations and things. Maybe I'll ask them to put together a little presentation for this, or this one's got like really good ideas of like engaging families. Let me ask them about this. Or this one's really passionate about I don't know, reaching this type of population of people. Let me, you know, give them the space to develop that. So it's kind of recognizing what everyone is good at. As much as it's the managers and the organization's responsibility to support us with what we want to do, there is a bit of a responsibility that lies with us as well. And I think it is probably around being a bit more forthcoming with things. Like, I know you're saying even if you aren't forthcoming, it's still good for the managers to suggest things to you and, you know, support you to kind of progress in the area that you want to. But I do think we do have some responsibility as well, in terms of speaking to managers about what it is that we're interested in. You know, I guess in your situation, Arabna, doing your own studying. I know it shouldn't always be
finding stuff, finding information.
Yeah, finding
even
information.
Even if you can't fund it yourself or whatever, just at least finding the information so that you can go to people with, I found this, it will help with this, I'd like to do it for this reason, or I have the skills to do this. But that does take a lot of courage as well.
Yeah.
To be able and confidence to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think even when people are professional, we mustn't forget that they also still have a personality. And some people don't deal well with rejection. If they've been told no so many times, then they're not necessarily going to go back another time. Some people have got that resilience that actually they would keep fighting for what they believe is right. And other people just give up. So it's just finding the right balance with that sort of thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing. It's so complicated, and there's so many parts to it. But I do think that it is quite sad that we've all sort of experienced this at different levels of feeling like you're being held down for a reason that you don't know, but other people around you are actively being pushed forward. If it was that everybody was being held down, then it's like, you know, we're all in the same boat. But when it feels like you're being actively overlooked, it's not. It's a difficult position to be in, and like you said, Bumi, depending on the person's personality, their home circumstances, their financial situation. Like some people have a family and children, they don't have the time outside of work to be funding their own courses and going on this and going on that. That's not fair to expect that person to do that as well.
And let's be honest, the courses aren't cheap.
No, they're not.
Absolutely not.
A lot of them are not cheap.
So we've spoken a lot then about kind of our experiences. If there's anyone listening at the moment who is going through something similar, where they feel that they are in a workplace where progression has been so difficult, what would be your advice to someone listening?
That's a hard one. I don't know.
I was going to say the same thing.
I kind of don't know what to advise, because at the end of the day, it's kind of bigger than us. There's things that you can do to make yourself feel better, maybe get in a better situation, move on, etc. I'm never afraid of telling people to consider moving on, because life is too short for that. Don't actually have, in a weird way, I don't have anything to advise. I don't, because it's kind of like, it's not you yourself as some of the other things we've talked about, you as a person can do a lot to get around it, but this is systemic, and you as a person, there's going to be a few people who can fight through and do this and that, and then when they get there they can make opportunities for other people. But I feel like this is something that is huge and actually needs the people in positions of power to actively do something about it, to recognize it, to acknowledge it, and to do something about it, and to put things in place so that people can't get away with this sort of stuff. Because how is it that you can have teams where somebody goes on millions of trainings and has lots of opportunities to do this and that, and somebody else can have nothing? I'm not saying that's happened in all the places that I've worked. It's happened in some places, but not all of them. But these things do happen. So I think that it's the system. I feel like people sharing their experience may help, because maybe the people who are in positions of power, some of them may not have realized this, but I think a lot of them have. They have a lot of data. They know it's nothing new. Like, you can pull up stats for all of this stuff, so they do know. But I think there's a problem with actually trying to fix a problem. All I will say to people is just always do what you can for yourself, and don't allow anyone to clip your wings. If there's a way that you can go on a specific training, if you can create an opportunity for yourself, if you can do something, then do it, and make sure that you get the acknowledgement for it as well. You know, and a lot of things are about the way you talk to people and approach people and stuff. So maybe think about how you're approaching things and how you could talk to people to kind of give you more opportunities, things like that. But yeah, I think it's a massive multi-level issue.
I agree.
Same. I was actually going to say that actually for me, just thinking about it, that I would like for people to be aware that there are things you can do, but don't be so hard on yourself to not acknowledge the fact that there are systemic biases and difficulties on the path as well. So just be mindful of them. It's not an excuse to then give up altogether, but when you're mindful of them, then you can hopefully find a way around it and think of something else you can do. But yeah, it's important to consider both sides of that. Actually, I'll do my bit, but I'm also going to, I'm not going to deny the fact that there are things in the way. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What about you, Shania?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, if you've been in the workplace and you have actively, you know, raised the things that you want to do on numerous occasions, you're a hard worker, you know, you're very passionate about your job, you've done all of these things, so you've done everything, and you're not getting that support back, I would really consider moving on. I really would. And but I do think a lot of what we've spoken about anyway, you know, if there are any managers listening, I do think that these are conversations that managers should be having a lot more as a team, in terms of how to better support staff so that they do feel supported in what they want to achieve, to stop them moving on. How we can retain staff really by supporting them better. So I think from a management perspective, definitely these conversations should be had a bit more and should be carefully considered.
Definitely. And I think that there is a paucity of representation of people from ethnic minorities in management, in higher positions, in lots of things across different sectors. And even if you take into account the fact that they're minority, we are a minority, it still doesn't make sense. So it's just kind of being aware of that stuff and not being tokenistic and saying, you know, I'm going to put Arabna here so that we can tick off the BAME list or whatever, but actually looking at what is going on, just actually having conversations and trying to find out what is going on. Why is it that people are not actively putting people from ethnic minorities forward? Why is it? And I think when you look at it and when you talk about it a bit more, the more you do that, the more you'll see that actually a lot of it is laced with discrimination, stereotypes, other things like that. And once you see that, then you can hopefully break those barriers down. And I don't think anyone's asking for anything massive. It's just little things like, you know, putting things in place so that that person can move forward as well and progress. Because if you're not letting them progress, 1 year turns into 2, then 3, then 4, then someone can be there for 6 years in the same position and not being given any opportunities to move forward. Meanwhile, somebody comes within a year. Obviously, there are people that are exceptional and extremely talented. I'm not, you know, not here to shade those people. Good for you. But most people have that ability if they're motivated in the right way and given the right support to progress. So, you know, we are doing our part. We, especially like us three, we can tell you now we've done our part a lot where we've been, and that hasn't happened. So if that hasn't happened for us, and we've had to move to different places where they do actively do that and they do try and move us forward, what is that telling you? You know? So
what we're saying is not that, you know, there needs to always be someone from BAME origin in leadership or whatever. But what we're trying to say is that we should be considered, at least considered. So just like what we said before around, you know, having things, areas of interest that we want to explore, etc. I think rather than being overlooked and then just being given to someone else who seems to be similar in terms of culture and the way that they look, consider those other people and consider what actual skills they do have, you know, and consider them. You know, they might not be the most suitable person for the job, but they might be. But the whole point is to consider.
Yeah. And I would even say, like, actually put them forward, because at the end of the day, we all went to uni, we all did the same, like, it just goes back to the same thing. We all did the same course, we all did the interview, and you all decided that we were all good enough to work with you.
Yeah.
We do the same job. We have this, you know, we have supervision. You have decided that we are competent enough to work with you as well. So all of those things being considered, why is it that you're also not giving us, people from ethnic minorities, those opportunities that you're giving to others? Why? They need to actively give those opportunities to us as well, because otherwise it ends up with a lack of progression on top of everything else.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for joining us. On today's episode, we talked about our various experiences with progression. We also hope that you would share your experiences with us, and feel free to follow us on our social media platforms, as well as send us an email. It would definitely be lovely to hear from you. We also touched briefly on Anya's story, which we'll be going into greater details about on the very next episode, so you definitely don't want to miss that. Until next time, bye!